Yeah, I'd like to call the meeting to order at 4:30 p.m. I acknowledge that the District of Tofino operates within the territory of the Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation. And a notice to attendees that the meeting is being video recorded and will be published on the District of Tofino's YouTube channel. A notice to virtual attendees to sign up for public comment or question period using the Q&A function in Zoom. To register, participants are required to enter their full name, residential address, and the agenda item they wish to speak to. Seeing no objections, that motion is passed by unanimous consent. And I'd like to recommend that pursuant to section 15 of the District of Tofino Meeting Procedure Bylaw, number 1229, 2016, as amended, the August 28, 2023 regular meeting be held electronically via Zoom and live broadcasted on the District of Tofino's YouTube channel. And that the facility provided for the public to watch and hear the meeting be located at the Municipal Hall, 380 Campbell Street in Tofino, BC. Seeing no objections, that motion is passed by unanimous consent. Adoption of the agenda. I'd like to recommend that, or I move that on August 28, 2023, the Committee of the Whole agenda be adopted. By seeing no objections, the motion is passed by unanimous consent. And then the adoption of the meetings. I move that the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting held June 5th, 2023 be adopted. Seeing no objections, that motion is passed by unanimous consent. And then public comment on agenda items.
Thank you, Councillor Sloman. I will now do a call to the public for comment. If there is anyone attending online via Zoom and would like to make a comment, you can do so now using the Q&A function on Zoom. You'll need to state your name, your address, and the agenda item you are speaking to. I will now do a call. Calling once, calling twice, calling 3 times. There are no comments at this time.
Okay. And moving on to delegations. Do we have any? None? And any correspondences? No. Okay. Presentations and reports. Ms. Bodner has a presentation for us.
Good afternoon, Council. I'm here to present the Q2 results of our 2023 budget, financial results. I just want to preamble that these are all the numbers that we're providing in this report are all unbudgeted, or sorry, unaudited and subject to and all values are provided, are considered information available up to and including June 30th, 2023. And in some cases, we do provide information beyond that point. Break down our presentation today. I'll do a brief financial officer's report, and then each department will provide an update on their departments as well as projects. I'll start with property taxation. The tax notices were mailed out on late of May 2023. They had approximately 1,400 notices mailed out. The tax due date was July 4th of 2023. And I've provided you with a table there, a breakdown of the balances. So the current taxes that were still outstanding as of the due date of July 4th, 2023 were approximately $1.3 million, or 24.6% of the total taxes billed. July 30th, for comparison, the taxes outstanding at the end of July are now $828,433,000, or 16.1%. For comparison, in 2022, at the tax due date, the outstanding receivables were $567,762 for 12.8%. The change or the higher outstanding balance, I mean, could be reflective of maybe people's ability to pay right away. Hard to say what the situations are, but that would be one of my guesses. Feel free to ask any questions as I move along.
I can ask a quick question. Just noting that there's a penalty on that outstanding. But how does that what does that go into, the penalty when it's finally received?
For clarification, sorry,
But there's a 10% penalty on big taxes.
correct.
It's $120,000. This is so I just wondered where.
I can speak to that if you like. So we usually do a estimate of previous 3 years from budgeting for a tax penalty. So we would have done that this year. So if there is an overage, it would go into general surplus at the end of the year.
To date, we've received 4 supplementary adjustments. Supplementary adjustments are any appeals or that are made by the property owner with BC assessment. And we've all 4 supplementary adjustments. Our total impact is only under $1,000. So very minor value to our taxation. As September 25th, 2023, we hold our annual municipal tax sale. That's per section 645 of the Local Government Act. We currently have 1 property that's subject to tax sale. For new councillors on at 10 a.m. on the last Monday of every September, the municipal collector will conduct an annual tax sale by offering for sale by public auction each parcel of real property on which taxes are delinquent. Delinquent taxes are any taxes remaining unpaid on December 31st, 2 years after the year the tax was imposed. And of note, there were no properties subject to tax sale in 2022.
Through the chair, it's slightly off top, but do we keep records of what if there are any appeals on assessment? I'm just curious as that would affect obviously the revenues that potentially could come in. Do we keep or are we informed of any appeals to property assessments?
I do, through the chair, yes, I do get notification of appeals that are in progress.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
If I may, through the chair. I'm unsure if maybe Councillor Steer, you're thinking of the initial appeals that may come in January.
Correct, yeah.
I'm not aware of a report that we received for those initial appeals, but for the ongoing appeals, as Ms. Bonner said, that we do receive updates throughout the year if they continue to move past that initial appeal process.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The table that I present there is presenting the arrears, the taxes and arrears, and then the delinquent taxes. So as of July 30th, 2023, our taxes and arrears are just a little over $22,000, whereas our delinquent taxes are a little over $8,000. And just for comparison, in 2022, our arrears were $29,000 and $10,766 for delinquent, and for 2021 arrears were $28,607 with delinquent $5,700. So we're I think doing fairly well with our delinquent taxes and being able to collect those prior to tax sale. We do actively work with the property owner to let them know that their property is subject to tax sale, potentially if they don't pay off their delinquent taxes before the 10 a.m. on the last Monday of September. And we're working with them as actively as possible to make sure that that property does not go to tax sale. The next section I'd like to talk about is our contingency allocations. So council approved in the general fund about a budget of $180,000 to fund unforeseen budget items, big items that that obviously we couldn't predict. For instance, in corporate services, we've had some alarm monitoring upgrades for our municipal hall, as well as the other divisions. Community services had one for fire at the fire hall, as well as the public works yard as well. So we all, every division underwent some assessment of our facilities and determined that we needed some extra monitoring of our facilities. So that's something that we didn't predict in the initial budget. There's also some staff related expenses there, and the staff costs could include overtime, some training, and as well as we've got a visioning exercise that we're planning to do in the latter half of the 2023. I'll note the community services, the early childhood, the ECE mentor expenses. We paid for an early childhood educator contractor to come on site to train our staff, as opposed to having staff travel outside in order to provide better continuity of service and provide obviously the training on site in our own facility. So that was a really good way to utilize the contingency. As well, I want to note, council, the business licensing software there. We're engaging with a better way to streamline the business licensing process, and hoping to streamline that process, as well as being able to analyze this data a bit better. So we end June 30th. Our contingency balance is still a healthy balance of over $95,000. For the water fund, we budgeted $48,000 in contingency, and the sewer fund, $56,888. And there's been minor minimal requirements for use of these contingencies. So we've got a healthy balance moving into the latter half of 2023. Just want to highlight some risks that we continue to see to our operating budget. Inflation. We're still experiencing higher than expected tenders. For instance, Neil Street and our council chambers renovation projects. Those came in, the tenders came in over budget. So the typical process is the project manager will come back to council through a report to council requesting an increase to those budgets. Infrastructure replacement, we're experiencing, as you know, aging infrastructure. We've experienced some water main breaks and leaks. To minimize the leaks, we've invested in leak detection equipment, and to hopefully address these issues and minimize further water loss, especially during our drought period. Interest rate risk on debt. As you may be familiar, rates on debt are higher than budgeted, significantly since adopting the 2023 budget. We have got a well-funded debt servicing reserve fund, and we will be fine in 2023, but we'll need to assess this for further budgets, of course. And the last one I just want to highlight is our staffing changes are affecting our capacity to deliver service. We're making a lot of attempts to fund or to fill any staff vacancies from within or from local staff, local people. Unfortunately, it takes time to find qualified candidates to backfill those positions. And it's been challenging, affecting our capacity to deliver core service, particularly in our public works yard, and we're experiencing a little bit of that in our finance section right now, and legislative services. I just want to remind council of corporate services. We have two major functions under corporate services. One is the financial services section, and the other is the legislative services functions. And you see some detailed core service, I'll call it, there for your information. And administratively, here's just a brief snapshot of our year-to-date result to June 30th. The first line, revenues, that is a budget remaining. So the way it's presented is the $43,963 under the budget remaining column is actually a favorable variance, if you will, in that this one is due to higher than expected investment returns on our operating cash balances. So that's a good thing. Grants, we've got $43,000 a timing issue there with our gas tax payments. And our debt proceeds, we did not require as much debt proceeds on our Ocean Park renovation than we had planned. And that's the $5,000 variance there. The remaining expenses are generally on track, and we're in a good position moving into the latter half of 2023. The next slide is an update on our Ocean Park renovations. I just mentioned that this project is had a project budget of $126,375 in 2023. It started in 2022, and our funding source is borrowing. The renovations were completed in March of 2023 with both suites occupied at the end of April. Unfortunately, the interest rate on the debt is a bit higher than what was originally approved by council. Council approved a rate of 3.6%, and we're currently paying 5.55%.
Through the chair, I've just got a question around, if you could jog my memory, why we went to debt servicing for this particular project.
Through the chair, I have my thoughts on it. We've got both tenants, the revenue, or sorry, the rental payments that they make actually pay off the principal payment of the debt, principal interest payment of the debt. But maybe CAO Atiana can fill in that.
Thank you. Yes, through the chair. Ms. Bonner wasn't here when we made that decision, so I'm happy to weigh in. So we didn't have the funds to do a renovation and improve that property. And C&I levy isn't used for that. It'd be okay to use for larger repairs and maintenance. So we did borrow over 5 years in hopes to recover most of the debt with rental income.
Thank you.
Here's a bit of a snapshot on the council budget to June 30th. Generally, the budget is on track with available funds to fund the upcoming council attendance at UBCM and other planned meeting expenses. That concludes my portion of, or this portion.
Thank you, Ms. Bonner. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'll be presenting the Community Services Division, which is very broad. Many departments and functions in the organization are within this division. I won't go through them all just for efficiency. I think Council is familiar. So first up is culture and events, and both filming fees and the community hall rental revenue. We are seeing higher revenues than anticipated, and we're just attributing to that to COVID is somewhat over and events are back. Hopefully there's limited venues for functions in town, and so the community hall is seeing quite a bit of pressure there. We've added the facility attendant position, which is a part-time position, which will help support evening and weekend use so that we're able to open up some of those times in the hall that we haven't been able to support with staff in the past. Community Children's Center, we continue to obviously operate the center. We have in June, 21 children enrolled, 5 half days, full day. We are not fully operating at capacity right now. Again, just still experiencing challenges with staffing and finding qualified early childhood educators. And we continue to train staff in-house, early childhood assistants and early childhood education ECEs as well. We just had one of our staff complete the program, is now a full-fledged ECE, so that's very exciting. And we have been able to recoup many of those costs through a program called the BC Employer Training Grant. So while we're investing in training, we're able to get that training back. And I'll just speak to something Ms. Bodner discussed in her presentation on the contingency allocation. A part of the ECE training is to undertake a practicum, a number of practicums, and it's other centers are in a similar boat that we are, in that they are operating with limited staff capacity and they can't take practicum students. The other challenge is if we send one of our staff out for practicum, we don't have enough staff to operate the center. And so that's why we've brought in an early childhood educator who's able to supervise practicums in the center, and licensing and Pacific Rim Early Childhood Institute were able to work with us on that. So that was a success. Here we see fees, and again, the fees are, revenue is not as high as one would hope at this time of year, and that's just a reality of us not operating at full capacity. So our staffing expenses are lower than anticipated as well. Recreation revenues, this is about where we'd expect to be at this time of year, noting that summer program registration does come in June. So that is bumps up that revenue a little more than you would expect at just partway through the year. That continues to be functioning well. Nothing really of note to highlight there. Parks and Trails Recreation Strategic Plan, that is a project that's going to span across a number of departments within the organization, and that's scheduled for fall 2023. And planning services, jump into that. Municipal hall renovations, Ms. Bodner alluded to this as well. We had an unsuccessful procurement earlier this year in the spring. So we have gone back to the drawing board somewhat with design and just being able to provide contractors with a bit more concrete detail to get on or to quote on around the mechanical. A big part of the renovation is around the mechanical systems in this building and the heating and cooling, because it's all around the perimeter of this room, and to renovate this room, we have to address the heating and cooling. It's only heating right now, but it will be cooling as well. Planning, again here, just sort of operating budget, nothing. I'll go into projects a little bit after this with some more detail. Grants and contributions there, looks like we didn't receive something that we're maybe expecting to receive, and that's just it's a transfer of the development approvals review grant that we received in previous, and so that's the remainder that will be coming in, will be transferred at the end of the year, so that will look better. Mackenzie Creek study that is scheduled for the fall of this year, and that one is to develop baseline information around the health of Mackenzie Creek prior to development. Mackenzie Creek not just being on Mackenzie Beach Road, but throughout a large portion of the community, and will affect some of the development permit requirements around development that happens in and around the creek. Mobile population census. This one we've been working with a number of partners on. It does look like we'll be going this one alone in the end. And this one, Tourism Tofino is undertaking some similar work, but is looking for different data. And so it sounds like the two data sets that we're looking for are quite different. So that one is for fall 2023, and there's a contract that has been drafted for that. Development approvals framework. Council will recall recently at the August 8th meeting that both the development application procedures bylaw and delegation of council authority bylaw were adopted, and we're now working on the online application of the whole and procedures that will reflect the new procedures there. And not the same software we're using for the business licensing. So it'll all be sort of a one-stop shop, hopefully very customer friendly for folks applying, making applications. Environmentally sensitive area report. That is another one where we'll be working with environmental consultants. This one is a multi-year project, which is beginning in fall of 2023. Emergency planning, I'll go into more detail on the projects after this, but again, looking somewhat what you would expect at this time of year, sort of half of that funding is there. Tsunami siren audibility review. This is scheduled to begin in the fall of this year, and this is to determine, can you hear the sirens from every portion of the community? Where are the gaps? And just to prioritize where the location of the next siren is, which is funded actually through the Resort Municipality Initiative in the 2024 budget. Community recovery framework. Again, this is scheduled to begin in 2024. There's a new legislation happening around emergency management. So this project has been deferred so that our framework will align with the new legislation, which is due out in the new year. Emergency program strategic plan. Again, this is supposed to begin in this fall and conclude in early 2024. No expenses to date. And vertical evacuation, by the end of Q2, there were no expenses, but work is happening now in Q3 on this. And in 2024, this is a big number, but that's over the 2 years. It's just 270,000 that is budgeted this year, and that is related to a design and cost estimate for the project. Again, this is funded by grants and contributions, not taxation. Building inspection, just to make sure I'm keeping up with my notes here. Again, the amount we budget for revenue here is sort of steady through the years and tends to fluctuate quite a bit. At Q2, the balance was $35,655, but during the summer, we did see an uptick in building permit revenue, so that those numbers will be higher in Q3. EOC building safety upgrades. This is essentially stairs that are safe to access the upstairs of that building, and that work is underway. It began in Q2 and is anticipated to be complete in Q3. RMI, this is just a little description of what the resort municipality is. Again, a provincially funded program to support small tourism-based municipalities. I think the council is quite familiar with this program. And so I'll just go into some of the projects that are being funded this year. One is a contribution towards the Tofino Theatre venue improvement. We understand that the theatre is beginning work or hoping to begin work this fall. They did receive a BC Arts grant, and that has a funding or a project completion timeline that they're working with. And so they anticipate to be doing some work this fall. They've also fundraised a significant portion of dollars to improve that venue. Free shuttle, a small amount of funds expense there. And of course, the free shuttle starts at the end of June. And so the actual expenses were just related to preparing schedules, signage, that type of thing. That project or that service wraps up after Labor Day weekend. It has been going fairly well this summer, I understand. Multi-use path upgrades. So by the end of Q2, this was a gravel path, and it sort of stayed that way for a period of time while we waited for some asphalt that was on the other side of Cameron Lake for a good part of the summer and has recently been paved. But at the end of Q2, it was just still in a gravel condition. And we're just waiting for line painting, shouldering, signage, that type of thing, the finishing touches, but it's smooth and usable. Tonquin Bridge replacement. This is there's just one bridge on the Tonquin Trail. It's an old timber bridge, and it's insufficient for us to be able to get our equipment to maintain the trail across it. Can't bring a mini excavator or anything like that, or a load of gravel across that bridge. So this project will replace that bridge with a new abutments and bridge structure. And we received no submissions to the most recent request for quote. And so a bit of a redesign is happening, but we still expect to get that project done through the fall. We're working with some constraints around fish and streams, working in and around streams. So there's a bit of a timeline there, but otherwise that's now back on track, I would say. Neil Street Village Green, very visible project here downtown. And it's going quite well. We did have to do some redesign of retaining walls and things like that. There were some trees that were in jeopardy, and so adjustments were made to be able to retain those trees along one perimeter of the courts. And so that is on track to be completed this fall. Fox Bay washrooms, council will recall that contract was awarded this spring, and that project was scheduled to start in October, but is now going to be starting a little early in September. And so you'll see that work happening in the multi-road parking lot, and that's a very exciting addition to that beach access. The west float replacement is obviously the First Street dock, and that work is completed or was completed at the end of Q2. Fire department, here's operating budget. I'll go into the projects after this as well. First, I have a few details on call volumes. So these are the calls to date in 2023. You can see that the bulk of the calls received are first responder calls. There are three with a little asterisk there, structure fires, and just in case anyone doesn't remember structure fires happening this year, two of those were mutual aid calls to Q&amp that were stood down before our crews made it to Q&amp. And the third was a relatively minor sort of brush fire in a planter, so nothing too major there. Alternative water source equipment. This was to a purchase of equipment which has been purchased to allow crews to draw from salt water or draw from alternative water sources, not necessarily salt, but potentially. That equipment has arrived, and staff is looking at doing some training, testing the equipment out. The challenge with this is that even if you do use salt water, you are meant to flush the equipment with fresh water afterwards. And so the training and the test runs of this equipment we're kind of waiting on the water restrictions to ease, because certainly we don't want to be using potable water at this time. There are a couple of water sources outside of the community that have been looked at, and potentially doing some joint training with Q&amp as well to test in those locations. Now, fire equipment upgrades. This was just over half of this was funded by a community emergency preparedness event. Was for new turnout gear, new sets of turnout gear, some of which have been received. They are custom made for the firefighter. And so some of those are on the way, some of them have been received, and there's a few more that are expected before the end of the year. Bylaw services. I think I'm almost near the end here. This just gives you a snapshot of bylaw violations. Now, this does not include Robin's parking revenue or violations through that service. And business licensing, here's just a snapshot of business licenses in 2023 as compared to the previous 5 years, as well as revenues. And with that, if there are no questions, I will hand it over to Mr. Rogers for Infrastructure Public Works.
Great, thank you, Mr. Mark. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm going to work through these slides fairly quickly. I'll start briefly on the line by line items, and then get into the projects under each of the categories. And then to finish off the project, we saved all of the pictures and the great presentations for the end. And then Mr. Kirkman will be presenting on wastewater treatment plant and Q&amp. So I'll look forward to that at the end of this. Infrastructure and public works overview. I understand that council knows what we are, what we do, but for everybody out in the internet world, we're comprised of infrastructure, which is engineering, asset management, and project management, public works, which is water, sewer, road, facilities, parks, and fleet, and then we also take care of things like water conservation, paid parking, waste, and supply and change projects. In terms of paid parking, this is probably a little bit early for this snapshot. We really got going, in July for this project. And so What I can tell you now, unaudited numbers, but August looks like we'll be just shy of $200,000 for the entire system for revenues. And so that's probably, you know, a good mark as we go forward from years to come for the summer months. Down under our street expenses, we can see some expenses which is basically related to purchasing signs. Those signs are quite expensive, and we purchased a number of those for the pay parking program. Public Works. There's not much that I can talk about this slide at this point. The grants and donations, those will be primarily from the Mackenzie Beach project, COVID restart grants, Sandpiper bus shelter, the West Float Surf Rider, and then Olson Road Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure grant or potential grant. Moving on with Public Works, I can draw your attention to the Public Works Yard building in that GL. That was the beginning of our project to supply the YSR building, which is on the same lot as the Public Works building. So supply that building with water and sewer for the first time in 20 years. And that project, as I understand it, is about 95% complete in Q3. So we can look forward to the folks there using the washrooms. Fleet and equipment, no concerns right now. We're looking at moving towards a leasing program that IO Council will report on. And so we'll see a potential update there for Q3. And everything else seems to be tracking according to plan, and no major variances to report in Public Works. In terms of projects, we have Mackenzie Beach Road full pave. I think council is fairly familiar with this project to this point. We finalized the final designs, meeting with the surveyors and the engineers this week to decide when we may be able to tender this. There's an outside chance that this can still get tendered for 2023. So that's what we're working towards now. If it doesn't get tendered, or if we run out of runway in terms of the paving window, then it may get the paving section at least make it forward to spring 24. Arnett Road storm improvements. This project's still on the books. We haven't started it yet. We've completed the design. We received some pricing that was significantly over budget, and so Mr. Kirkland has been working with the contractors to find out what we can do within our current range of funding. And so council expect an update on this for Q3. Olson Road storm main, it's under review by our engineering consultants. We've been waiting for a response from Ministry of Transportation Infrastructure related to their portion of the project, which they've committed to in the past, but haven't recommitted to with the new pricing. At this point, due to other projects backing up, this is likely a 2024 project. Asset management is going great. We're currently implementing our software. We're mapping out different district infrastructure on a daily basis, as well as for all our current ongoing projects or water main breaks, for example. The framework is starting to be built out as well for integrating into the rest of the district. We expect to have a fairly comprehensive presentation for the Q3 report presented by Mr. Orchiston and Mr. Kriba to give us a kind of a working understanding of the project. It's hopefully very interactive and enjoyable. Bay Street Access Road. This project is to develop the district's own access to the Bay Street pump house that sits on the Bay Street road end. What we need that for is to access our current infrastructure so that we can maintain it. Currently, we use a private property, a driveway to a private property that has worked well for 30, 40 years, but may be coming to a time where that might not work for us anymore. So we want to make sure that this project gets designed and then funded for construction, likely at this point in 2024. We spoke to the engineers today. We're expecting a rough order of magnitude cost estimate later today or tomorrow morning. First, the dock improvements. These are minor improvements that were expressed through the current condition assessment, and so we intended to do small little upgrades every year for the next 5 years. This first upgrade was quite minor. I believe it maybe we were doing some pile caps. Just because of, again, the year's been quite busy. We've just going to push the first piece back to 2024. So the council can expect to see a project sheet for this for next year. Fleet management. So we're working working on a potential working with a consultant for a leasing service to help us try to help us manage our fleet a little bit. We'll spend a little bit more time managing our fleet and making sure that our vehicles are fit for purpose and in good condition. In advance of that, we've purchased a truck to replace Unit 2. Unit 2 was, I don't know if you'd seen it, but it was an old dump truck that drove around town. It needed some major repairs this year that didn't really match up with its value. So we sold that and are looking at getting a new truck to replace that. There has also been some internal discussion very recently about going into a modular system of truck where we would have a number of chassis and different boxes that we could put on or off. That's in the early stages of conversations, but something that maybe council might see in 2024. Water fund. Basically, not much report here. The grants and contributions are related to the municipal, the Natural Asset Initiative for Mears Island. Do not have anything to report on this slide other than everything seems to be moving according to plan and no significant variance seems to be noted. Expect to spend a little bit more time at Q3. In terms of projects, Bay Street upgrades phase 1 is the complete. So Bay Street upgrades, the design is complete. We're working with our engineering consultants to finalize the payment of that. The next step for this will be phase 2, and phase 2 will be the actual development of the Bay Street UV program at the Bay Street Pump House. We're not funded for that. We didn't receive the grants that we applied for last year. And so we're looking towards other sources of funding, and council can expect to see construction project sheet for 2024 with the proposed project. In the background, the conversation we're having right now is whether the UV upgrades that we have to do for VHA requirements, whether it makes sense to spend $2 million or $2.5 million putting that into a building that is at end of life in a location that may be susceptible to sea level rise at the end of a system that we might not be using for water supply in 10 years. And so as we get ready to do this project, we're just sort of stepping back and waiting for the water master plan to drop in December before we start making any really big decisions that we can't back out of. So hope it's clear.
Well, I think you might have answered it in terms of because I know there had been previously a lot of work in terms of the grant application for the upgrades to that system, and we were unsuccessful in that. But there was a lot of preliminary design work that had been completed for that, was my understanding. So I was just
that's the end. So we funded this program, the phase 1, through the the leftover funds from the Bars Mountain Reservoir. Combined with district own source funds to develop the actual design of the system. And now that the system has been designed, it would be time to install it, build it and install it. But we do want to wait until we see what the water master plan says to make sure that we're not putting a significant resources into a facility that might not be ready for that. So that's something for us to consider.
No, you captured that. I mean, we're completing the water master plan to help inform us, where it's best used to buy major process equipment. If we're gonna start, if this facility is gonna last for another 10 years, and then we burn 10 years of service life on a major piece of equipment, maybe more feasible to source out another place to relocate the facility instead of investing in a whole bunch of new assets.
Right, and through the chair, if I may just to follow up that, because this is a provincial requirement through DELEGATIONS that we have to be in compliance with.
Yeah, I think because exactly right. So I think what we're gonna do is once we get the water master plan back, and we see where this lies there, the conversation becomes then probably between us and the province about what do we do? Like, are we in a rock and a hard place where we just have to do this and bite the bullet, knowing how long it actually takes to develop new infrastructure and how long it's gonna take for some of these. So that's just one of the ones that's gonna, I think it's gonna follow the water map plan that we're just gonna have to spend a little bit more time on, so we're all comfortable undertaking that project.
Thank you.
It actually does tie into the Bay Street access as well. If the Bay Street station is not for purpose, why going to, unless you were going down there to rebuild it and build it higher or build it better. There's lots of little new pieces here that we're not quite sure, but we have the plan, we're just not quite sure we're ready to move forward with that yet.
Through the chair, just to build on to, there could be opportunities that maybe there's a phased upgrade to Bay Street, so maybe UB's the first step, and then maybe there's some sort of retrofitting that occurs to the structure to, you know, help it be more resilient to climate change, so on and so forth. We're not saying we're shutting down the construction of this design that, you know, previous staff have worked so hard to get it to this point, but we want to make sure that we have a big picture plan of what we're going to do with that critical infrastructure. That helps shed a little bit of light.
The beauty of master planning.
Oh, yes.
District water master planning. So leading right into it, this is well underway. We received a number of technical reports as far as in our last meeting. We understand this is on schedule to be completed by the end of 2023, probably early December. Mir is a natural capital asset. We haven't begun this project. The group that we're working with is fairly, they have a different time frame than we necessarily, so we're just hoping to get this underway in the fall of 2023.
Sorry, just a question through the chair. Would this also help to inform the previous slide, the master plan as well, and be incorporated into those types of conversations?
I think it will.
Yeah.
This project will involve significant discussions, partnerships with the local First Nation. So this project occurs with this local First Nation and understanding, you know, that whole island and through that lens. So this may not play into it may play into where we're getting our water next, or how much water we can get out of this, you know, particular area, and what does that mean for us as a region? What does it mean for us as local governments and First Nations governments? So it's sort of tangential, but it will impact. Remote monitoring and telemetry upgrade. This is a project that goes over a number of years. We spent a little bit of time working on this summer to make sure that our current telemetry is working and functioning, and it is now. I think we'll probably pause that for now until we get the result back from the water master plan to make sure again that we're spending our limited resources, you know, in the most appropriate way. Sewer fund. I literally have no notes in my sewer fund, so that means that I am happy with it. No major variances to report at this time. We've done a number of upgrades to the not conveyance system, but the wastewater treatment plant. What's my word?
We're doing the wastewater.
No.
We've done some upgrades to the lift stations.
No, instead of conveyance, which is water, lift stations are
Sewer pump stations.
No, that's how we move sewer. We don't convey it. We do convey it.
We compare.
I think a distribution. We're not distributing our sewers, we're conveying sewer. Student words. So we worked on our conveyance system, our existing conveyance system, undertaking some isolation, lift station isolation valves and generator projects, the current system. And then in the near future, that will be upgraded through the wastewater treatment plant project. The station generator replacements. We've installed one. We're waiting for delivery for the additional 2 generators, so that's still underway. Our lift station isolation valve project is complete. We're just finalizing the final payment with the contractor. Now all of our stations have isolation valves, I believe, so we can help our system function a little bit more reasonably for our operators. The fourth main project, just really started underway that in the last couple of months, so wouldn't be much to report from the Q2, other than to say that, again, the pre-design stage is underway. We'll be doing some testing in the next couple of weeks to inform the design. And then from there, we'll be getting to the next design work in the end of 2023. And then start narrowing down what the actual construction cost of that will look like. And the pictures. Does the council have any questions for those slides?
I do.
Oh, great.
What does telemetry mean?
Oh, basically, it's how we like a radio.
Okay.
Like a radio power SCADA system talks to the equipment we have out there. So telemetry is the radio talk back and forth. I think we also use it in terms of, I don't know if it's what's proper, but in terms of like digital. So we can sell our cell receptions back and forth there,
Okay.
even satellites. So yeah, basically controlling something from a distance. I'm gonna leave the engineer to tell you that wrong.
Right, moving there, council. For telemetry, so to kind of just help that through the chair, so we have a couple tanks and we want to monitor what the level is over there. So we don't have automation over on Mears Island, but we do, however, have eyes on it over there. So if I'll use the Close Creek surge tank, which we have, for example, there's a float system in there and it measures it in like quarter increments. So if the tank's quarter full, half full, 3/4 full, or full, that signal, if that float's flipped, will go up to a radio antenna and then bring it over to another antenna over here on in the Tofino side, and then we're able to see on our SCADA system. So that's our supervisory computer automated system. So then our operators can actually see in live time where our levels are at. And then there's going to be future opportunities where we can monitor more of our sources via those mechanisms, which we're interrogating through the water master plan process, and then potential options for having automated control potentially in the future over there as well. I'm going to talk about the wastewater treatment plant. So I just have a photo here, kind of showing an overview close to the end of June of where the project was at. Does this have a laser pointer?
No.
Okay. That's okay. I don't have a meter stick. So on the far right hand side, you can see the large structure getting framed out. That's the mechanical building, which will house all the administrative functions as well as all the pumping systems within the facility, the UV reactors, basically a big process gallery kind of on the left side, and then it will also house our new SCADA, so control room. So the district SCADA system will be operated kind of solely out of a control room in there, and a large electrical room in there, and then some workshops for staff to complete maintenance on various pieces of equipment. Then you can see all the tanks. So the 4 kind of tanks in the middle there, those are the main process tanks that take care of treating the influent sewage as it goes through the facility. The big one kind of in the back 40 at the back there, that's a big equalization tank. So it kind of acts as a surge tank during wet weather events to control the flow rate of the influent sewage as it goes through the facility. And kind of at the far end, which you can't really see, but I will show a couple of photos of progress of that building, is the headworks building, which removes all the screening and grit from the influent raw sewage prior to it entering the facility. Okay, so kind of an executive update here. This is some of the most words that you'll see in this part of the presentation, but overall progress updates. So civil site work is complete at the plant, and I'm just going to focus on the wastewater plant. And this part I've broken it out so the conveyance and the outfall will follow in their own respective sections. So the civil work at the plant is complete. Major concrete work has been completed at the wastewater treatment plant now. With the formwork subcontractor looking to claim for partial substantial completion in the near future. The mechanical building structure and the building envelopes been installed now, which you'll see in the forthcoming photos. The headworks building, structural steel is ongoing. This week, we're going to start with sheeting it to build the building envelope. The glass line steel tanks have been installed. So those are the big blue tanks that handle the main part of the process. Major equipment deliveries are ongoing. So we've got the centrifuges have shown up to site. We've got waste activated sludge pumps on site, centrate pumps on site. The clarifier mechanisms are showing up. So lots of fun major equipment deliveries ongoing and coming up through the latter part of 2023. We have process mechanical installations ramping up, as well as electrical rough-ins and cable tray installations ramping up. So the M&E trades are starting to, you'll see their worker power curves start to peak, likely come the end of September. And we also have drywall and framing installations ongoing inside the mechanical building. So speaking of the mechanical building, there's the exterior of the mechanical building as it looked last week. So you can see there's one part left out here on the siding for the overhead coiling door to go on. Just inside that room is where our solids processing area is. So that's where the biosolids will be removed and transported from that location to the landfill in the ACRD, just past the golf course there. Here's just another view of the mechanical building with some double door accesses. We've got a storage room, workshop, and then double door access to the electrical or MCC room there as well. And then another garage door there, which will access the process gallery. So crews will be able to remove equipment easily from that area. And if anyone wants to stop me at any time, just stop me and ask questions. Keep it casual. So here's tank access stairs and platforms. So on the left-hand side, there's the IFAS tank, which is the primary treatment tank. On the right-hand side, we have the secondary clarifier and then a stair tower. So staff can access to look at instrumentation up there, do maintenance on the clarifier driver motor, and so on and so forth. Next one, so here's these are the first two pumps that were installed on the project last week. So big milestone for starting off mechanical work. These are the waste activated sludge pumps. Kind of perpendicular to them are the centrate pumps. They're the same style of pump. So they look the same. Next time, if you come out for a tour of the facility, you'll see them progress even further. Some stainless steel process piping being plumbed to them. Here's some of the framing as of last week in the administration, showing kind of the administration area up top behind the framing. Down below in the immediate vicinity is where the electrical or motor control center room will be, with all the starters and VFDs and all that kind of fun stuff. Great progress there. It's kind of all the building blocks for all the other trades to come and do their respective scope of work. Here at the top, the top end of the hydraulic gradient of the facility is the headworks building. That's where all the flow will be conveyed or pumped from both the Main Street pump station just behind us over here and from Warren Way, which captures all the South Tofino influence sewage. Everything gets pumped to a high point here, goes through screening equipment, grit removal equipment into a splitter box, which you can see is installed now, kind of right-hand side there, and flows by gravity for the most part through the facility. And here's this is the secondary clarifier. So this is part of the secondary clarifier mechanism. These are the launder troughs. So these troughs get installed up at the top of the tank. You can see the worker here assembling them on the tripods there, sawhorses. That is where the clean water, after it has been treated, or the effluent, I should say at this point, will flow into these launder weirs and then travel by gravity down to where the effluent pumps are in the UV reactors. And then at the bottom of this tank is where all the sludge will get squeegeed essentially down into a hole and then sent over for processing at the centrifuges or returned to the head of the plant. So big milestones showing those go in. They're FRP, so great for service life and corrosion resistance. So yeah, that's the bulk of the facility area as of last week. This week is a whole bunch more progress starting. So here's a high level executive summary of the conveyance works that's the most invasive going on around town that everybody knows is. So structural work just behind us at the Main Street pump station is ongoing. I believe if they didn't get it today, tomorrow, I think they're casting concrete to the roof structure there, so be able to slowly see Main Street be restored to two-way traffic. Slowly, we want to get pavement done over there, so by the end of November, which I'll show on my milestone chart or list in a couple slides, kind of get this area back here cleaned up. Structural work at the Warren Way pump station at the foot of the Crow Excavating Company's driveway is ongoing, kind of the same sort of stage as Main Street. The roof is about to be cast this week. Excavation and civil works, some people have probably noticed, is occurring now at the Centennial Park pump station. We have civil backfill works starting to ramp up at the Wharf pump station down at First Street dock at the bottom of First Street. Upon the Tonquin connector, the service road has been installed, and now this week and late last week, crews are starting to install the two pipelines through the Tonquin connector, the effluent and influent force mains. The Warren Way force main is being installed. It's about 80% completed now. We've got the bulk of it done adjacent to the Crow private property now. We got the water main to the wastewater treatment plant being installed, / we just need to finish the tie-in. So all that infrastructure is in place now. Some photos. So here's concrete placement to the second lift of the Warren Way pump station walls. This photo there. Sunny day. Here's last week the prep work to install the roof to the Main Street wet well, so behind us here. We've got the excavation commenced at Centennial Park, where will be a similar FRP wet well structure with some smaller size pumps, similar to what's going on at the bottom of First Street. We have the backfill progress at First Street with the FRP wet well chamber. We have the progress along the Tonquin connector, so the service road, as you will, the installation progress. It's been cut in all the way. Look forward to kind of talking about what different future uses can be made of the Tonquin connector after the project's been completed. Moving to the outfall, so executive summary on the outfall. So a bunch of big milestones were achieved last week. So jetting and dredging has been completed for the in-water works. The outfall terminus structure was installed last week. So all this in-water work is great because August 31st was our deadline for getting that done with the DFO fisheries window. So big milestone and great work by all the crews. They worked very hard on that. We have the new outfall signage installed. The overland outfall piping is installed to the top of Cedar Street. We do still need to cast that portion of it in concrete. So there's a reinforcing steel cage that goes around it, formed up, cast in concrete. The in-water portion, the hydrostatic testing has been completed. Nothing failed, so that's good news. Rare that HTP fails anyways, but still great news. So here's a photo kind of showing where the outfall pipe exits the in-water and makes its transition to the overland component. This part of this overland will be backfilled in sand. And then once we kind of get out of the tide zone, then that's where we'll transfer to the overland component being cast in place in concrete. This is from last week, a glorious photo of the terminus structure being installed at the orifice of the pipe. So kind of the purpose of this is to keep that orifice kind of afloat and keep it from sinking as well. So that'll help reduce a lot of maintenance, which Tofino does have a lot of challenges with its existing outfalls being completely covered in sand and buried at the bed of the ocean. So big milestone on that last week to drop this into place. And then we have our new outfall sign, still to cast concrete there, but it's all formed up and ready to receive concrete. I think that's all I have for the outfall. So a little bit of an exhaustive list, but everyone can read it later as well over a coffee sometime. So I'll quickly go through this one. So complete install of the in-water outfall installations was August 2023, which we completed last week. BC Hydro pole and transformer installations, that's scheduled to occur by the end of September. We're coordinating with BC Hydro with their related project quite tightly to make sure that all the timelines are transferred between the two projects. We're working towards completing all of the Tonquin connector or corridor works by the end of September. We're working with our various consultants to submit our operating certificate application to the MOE, and we're working with the MOE directly on that as well by the end of October, so it can align with our operational testing period. We're looking to complete the bulk of the civil works, kind of the in-town here, so Main Street and the wharf pump station by the end of November 2023. Still be some invasive work with installing kind of electrical controls, kiosks, odor control units and generators as those come, but kind of the disruptive things should be done. Then by the end of the year, we're working towards completing the majority of the disruptive invasive works at Warren Way and Centennial Pump Station. As well as trying to get the Arnett Force Main and Cedar Street outfall components completed by the end of the year here as well. We're working towards heating everything up, or energization, as I should put it, by March 2024 with BC Hydro. This is why we're pushing to get the infrastructure in place kind of at the latter end of this year, just so we're prepared for that. And then kind of it'll be a lot of process mechanical, electrical installations throughout the course of next year, and we're working towards doing our startup and testing anyways, or contractor startup and testing in June 2024. Correlating our operational testing timelines. We want to get our operating certificate, kind of the language finalized, coordinated with the Ministry of Environment by September 2024. Right now we're hoping that we're able to start sending some sewage out to the ocean sometime September 2024, which brings us to our substantial completion date of December 2024, which is what our baseline schedule showed. So quick overview on the status of NAC's contract. So we've progressed about 55% of the original contract value, so approximately $66 million. We're up to about 36 million. Got about $500,000 in change orders right now, which represents about 0.8% of the original contract value. We don't anticipate that to grow significantly. There are some changes that are a result of design changes since the design was completed at such an accelerated rate over the course of 2022. There's also some optimizations that are being realized that are resulting at times in credit, and then also at times at cost as well. There is a large component of the change orders was switching the construction insurance from the owner controlled policy, which we originally intended on doing, to a contractor controlled insurance policy. Just NAC was able to get better rates than what we were, which is why you see a bit of a lot of that is the value of change orders there. WSP's contracts. So WSP's got a budget, as you put it, with when you're working with consultants, of about 1.96 million. They've progressed, coming up to $500,000, and about 23,000 of that has been changes. This is as of April. They're 23% complete. We're still waiting on some of the outstanding invoices from WSP due to some accounting software changes that they were making corporately. However, based on trends and what level of effort's gone, we're projecting that by the end of June, they'd be about 35% complete their budget. So looking good. We're just keeping an eye on managing the level of efforts expended by our design consultants at WSP. Some of the design changes. So we have a couple owner requested design changes that results in that change order value. So reclaimed water system was something that we didn't really have enough time to incorporate in the design in 2022. So we're working towards bringing that up to speed. And we also decided we would automate the return activated sludge pumps. It'll result in a lot a lot more ease of operation from our utilities folks once they take over the facility. I think I'm gonna be handing it over to Mr. Bodner right now. I can move into the financial update on the capital project.
Thank you, Mr. Kirby. Quite the project. So I just want to give council a recap of the funding sources for this project. So our total expenditure budget for phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 1, the 54,909,000, phase 2, 22.6 million for a total of 77,500,000. Federally, they'll contribute 40% or 31 million, provincially 33.33% or 25.8 million, and other contributions 26.67% or just a little over $20 million there. And that other funding source includes our district borrowing.
Here, just a quick question on that back slide there in terms of if I'm correct, was our borrowing capacity was about 16 million roughly. I'm just curious where the other 4 million would come from.
If I could pass along to CAO Etienne.
So our district contribution will, or the debt portion will maximize that 16 million. At this time, we can't confirm exactly what the difference is. So we indicated that there's other sources of funds. They have been confirmed. Okay. Thank you.
So to date, to June 30th, total grant funded. So our total expenditure to June 30th was $36,174,000, of which $26.5 million came from provincial and federal funding sources. The other source, or apologize for that slide, is a little off. The $9.6 million from other sources. That's our portion there. The eligible costs, so 98.5% of the $96 million is eligible, so we can fully claim those. 1.5% or 144,809 is considered ineligible under the grant conditions. And those ineligible costs primarily make up the salary and benefit costs for our district project manager, any project legal costs and travel. To date, those are the ineligible costs. So to ensure that the District of Tofino's contribution stays within budget, we monitor cash flow very carefully. CAO Etienne and I meet bi-weekly to monitor and discuss our cash flow forecasts. In addition, the wastewater treatment plant project team, of which I'm part of that and manager of financial services, we meet weekly to ensure we are all understand any unbudgeted issues, the status of the project. We understand the change orders that are coming through. We are also planning a future meeting of council to lock in our debt term and decisions, as well as looking at other sources of funding to fund the debt servicing costs, such as gas tax, the debt servicing reserve fund, and our MRDT contributions. Any questions on spending and funding sources for this project? In terms of the contingency, so our total project contingency is a little over $7 million for both phase 1 and 2. To date, we've spent a little over $1 million, or 15.5% of the total. And those items were project insurance, and Mr. Kirkland did mention that. We've had some design finalization, changes and optimizations, additional paving quantities, and archaeological and environmental field inspections make up the the majority of those contingency items. And that concludes our presentation.
To the chair, I'm just so excited to see all that, and thanks to Kirkland. It's fascinating to see all that work happening all at once. I'm just so proud of everybody.
And then I think we're gonna move on to opposing accelerate the funding grant, Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mayor Council, for the second presentation. I'll wait. I'm not saying this is.
Thank you for your insight.
There you go.
He's saying he has this good being. I'm young.
Good. For housing accelerated fund application. And so today we're going to present our draft application, and then maybe have some discussion about any amendments we would like to make before we finally apply, and then potentially bring that back to council in early September. A bit of a background, and I think council is somewhat aware of the HAF opportunity, but it is a significant grant opportunity offered by the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation. It was a grant that we were kind of notified about in February, but without any details. So we spoke to a CMHC representative at our planning conference who said there was this amazing grant opportunity coming by, but there was no details around that. And so when it finally did drop, it was an exceedingly short turnaround for the size of grant it is and the impacts it has to many communities. It's my understanding there's significant interest in this grant opportunity across the country. Everybody that I've spoken to, our consultants are all doing 6 or 8 different applications, and so I think it's going to be, competitive at the very least. I don't know off the top of that. I believe it's about $4 billion. $4 billion is being released for it, but $4 billion. Yeah, so that won't go that far. So it'll be very interesting to see what exactly the CMHC is looking for. The deadline was extended primarily due to the wildfires in the interior of British Columbia and other areas of Canada. And so the new deadline, I believe, is September 29th, which is great for us. We have a chance to come back to council and have this conversation. So a brief overview of the grant. It's focused on developing 100,000 additional housing units over 3 years. And what we mean by additional is that how we're going to track this is, each community will have a basic growth rate. Let's say Tofino is 4%. The additional is how many housing units above that with this incentive. So maybe you're building 100 units there. What's the additional amount above the regular 100 that you should be building? Just to sort of understand what this means when we talk about incenting half the units. The idea is, again, is not just to produce housing, but to try to just change the system somewhat to help speed up development approvals to increase housing supply. Reporting, from what we understand, we met with CMHC representatives a number of times, but what we understand is the reporting is going to be fairly light. There's going to be limited to reporting on the progress and initiatives that we've outlined in the action plan, the supporting data on the units that we permitted, and then confirmation that funding was used for permitted purpose. Without actually seeing the reporting framework, I can't tell you exactly what it was going to be, but the feeling that I was given from the representative from CMHC was that it would be pretty easy. Some of the other lenses that the grantors are looking at is making sure that we're developing complete low carbon climate resilient communities. A lot of that lines up with our current policy, specifically the District Community Plan about where and why we want to build, in the downtown containment area. So our application, as it stands today, would incent 68 additional units. So whatever we're already building is 68 units on top of that, of our current projected growth rate. One of our constraints in developing this project was our growth rate is so high in Tofino that there's very little room to grow additionally. And so I believe it's 1.1% was, you had to do at least 1.1% over our projected growth rate. And so we tried to be fairly conservative and not go too far above that, understanding our growth rate is already very high. So the 68 additional units, running through the formulations, and I'll go through that at the very end of the presentation, but resulted in us hoping to apply for $3.1 million projects. The application process is fairly prescriptive, so you have to have certain information in a certain format, and I think our consultants at Wiser have done a really great job of that. And so I believe we attached the draft grant to the council report, or to the whole report, and that a lot of that is going to be based on what the grant's requiring. And then just to sort of discuss our application, we focused on tenure, so like rental versus ownership, typologies of what the building look like, missing middle, and affordability. And the way that the grant works, that you get a base of $20,000 per incentive unit. You get a bonus if it's a certain type of housing, aka missing middle housing, and also another bonus if it's affordable. And that's how they calculate it. And I have an Excel sheet at the very end of this presentation. We can sort of go through it in a little bit more detail about that. So I'm going to jump right into the initiatives as we have, and then a little bit about next steps, and then maybe we can have a conversation, or please feel free to jump in. So initiative 1 is the developer incentive program. So that would be for 10 units. Again, a lot of this is developed under fairly strict timelines and a bit of guesswork, knowing how we've developed in the past and our own information on what the future looks like. And the intent here would be to incent the private sector to develop purpose-built rental units, below market housing, and our specific building typologies. We wouldn't be looking to incent, half-acre lots with a short-term rental on it. So we're looking to incent private development to develop the housing that we want. Some of the ways that this could happen would be through fee reductions, waivers, or exemptions, again, funded by the grant. This program would be supported through the housing needs assessment. And before I go any further, I probably should say that all of the initiatives that we're talking about are supported by the housing needs assessment, which is supported by other district documents like the official community plan, the multimodal transportation plan, the seniors plan from 10 years ago. The one piece that I think council should keep in mind is that this is an application for a very broad application for some very broad initiatives. When it actually comes down to, let's just say we're successful in getting a grant, we're going to have to come back to council with policies, with bylaws for changing how we fund things. We're going to have to come down with projects. So this is applying for these things. This is not the doing of it. If we get the grant, a lot of work that will follow.
Just question through the chair, and thank you for that. And just so I understand, so as an example for this initiative 1, so a private developer, if we were to look at if it's targeted housing, which is, you've answered most of my questions, but if it's targeted housing, so for example, that $20,000 potential for that unit could be used in the fee reduction, development cost charge, et cetera, which we could have, the developer, we could incentivize by offering that reduction through this grant, I guess. Would that be?
Yeah, it's a great question. Maybe I'll walk through an example of how this might work. So what would happen if we decided this was an issue that we were focusing on, which maybe we are, we would develop a policy around it first. So we'd say something like, we're willing to incent private development that provides us affordable housing and as a townhouse, just for an example. And then to be eligible, that you'd have to be those things. So we still get affordable housing, which is the private sector. We've had recently developments that haven't gone forward because they haven't been able to find the funding, and maybe what we provide at this point would be the funding to get those people over the I'm thinking about the Hayden subdivision or the Hayden townhouse. Like at some point the pro forma didn't work, but would the pro forma work if you were subject? The district could provide $20,000 in savings through fee reductions, incentives
per unit
based on the affordable ones, like so that In that project, I think we're looking at 4 affordable units. So you wouldn't be sending maybe the whole thing, but maybe you're sending the 4 units, which gets somebody just over the hump. That was the intent behind it. It wasn't to spend $100,000 per unit to get something done. It was more like, can we make the performer work in a sense? And this one was designed with that project in mind, and some other ones that have, you run up against the economics of it at some point. And again, like the part of the grant application, they're very specific. They don't want these details in the application, and so it's kind of hard for us to explain it. But that's the best way I can explain this one to date is basically just trying to get people over there. And understanding that, Tofino Housing Corporation, for example, which we're going to get into in a couple of initiatives down, does a lot of the below market affordable housing, but what we actually need to the community is housing of all types, market and non-market housing. So this would be a non-market or a market housing initiative. I think it's important to just, as we go through these, to recognize we're talking 6 to 8 units, so 10 units is what this was the projected amount above what we normally have. So that's about 15% of this grant. And I have a table at the end that so it compares all this. Initiative 2, so the accessory dwelling unit, ADU program, 6 units. It would be just increased rental supply in the village containment area. The idea would be to provide potentially some financial incentives, streamline the permitting process to make this an easy, short process for developers or landowners who want to take advantage of this, including perhaps developing 3 or 4 different designs that can be off the shelf approvable. So you're not going through a building permit process, you're saving yourself 2 months or 3 months in the building permit process, streamlined zoning process, and maybe you can go from concept to building within 2 to 4 months rather than 2 years. This project is a project that we're already undertaking. This is our tertiary dwelling project, which was a separate from our zoning bylaw update, but which I think has been combined now. This would just fund that, fund the beginning of that program. Again, we'd be developing designs, policy, potentially bylaw changes. When I speak to these 6 units, and I spoke to 10 units before in 6 to 8, those are in the 3-year timeframe. The report also, the application also requires us to look into the 10-year timeframe as well, and then it looks a lot bigger, and that's that systemic change that they're talking about. Initiative 3, this would be primarily a engineering and economic project. So we'd be looking at identifying lots in the downtown core that may be ready to be upzoned for multifamily units. And so the idea would be using our servicing information, understand which lots could absorb more density. And then once we understand which lots those are, put another lens on top, which would say how many units would we need to make this viable for a developer. And if you get in alignment with your servicing and your economic analysis, you can go then to those developers or to those landowners and say, we believe that this property is right for land development. Would you be interested in getting into this new process that we've created to upzone and redevelop your lots? This is something Camrose did a number of years ago as well for different purposes. There was more about ACTEV, economic development, but you go out there and you'd be quite direct with people.
Through the chair, just a quick question on that. So it sounds like looking at private developments, but we also I'm thinking we've done some preliminary work on municipal lands potentially. Would that enter? I suspect maybe in a later slide with THC that this may come into play, but you're smiling, so I suspect it maybe it does. So I'll leave it there.
No, that's great.
The question would center around looking at those municipal lands potentially for upzoning where we could densify. I know we've had those initial conversations. I think there is room to look at it again for sure.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, and I think this sort of speaks to. We've tried to get very broad with this because you're going to see in the next slide that we're going to propose most of this money goes to Tofino Housing Corporation, which is non-market housing that has restrictions. We want to make sure we're addressing all forms of housing. And so what you just spoke to in the Tofino Housing Board would be the same for this. So we help the private developers also build this housing, because in the end, the district is partners with housing developers. Like, we need the housing, that's their business model. We want to be working together. And this is one way we can do that. We can help move those things quickly with good data. So we're not just saying, oh, you have a single family home, you should develop 6 units on there, not knowing whether 6 units is viable, not knowing whether 6 units has servicing. So we take away a lot of that and make things a little bit more certain. Initiative 4, so support the Tofino Housing Corporation. So just remembering again, we talked about 68 total units, 42 of those we think we could supply through the Tofino Housing Corporation. One of the items there, to your point, Councillor Steer, was looking at the other different areas that we've identified as potentials in our fairly recent Tofino Housing report and drilling down to those. So are we looking at townhouses at Bay Street? Are we looking at the seniors residence going from 4 units to 16? Are we looking at a library project at the back here? Like, so that all of those things that we would probably want to spend a little bit more time with, and in speaking and understanding the process, in speaking with Ian Scott, understanding the process that Tofino Housing Corporation went through. The hard part at the beginning was finding the funding to do that pre-development work. And that's one of the projects we've sort of identified here, is that perhaps we can do some of this pre-development funding, the architects, the environmental, that hard work at the beginning before you get into the actual funding of the capital works. So yeah, this would be a significant amount of our effort would be working with the Tofino Housing Corporation, because this is a corporation that's wholly owned by the District of Tofino, is successful, has a track record, and why not support what we already do well? Different type of housing, more below market, restricted housing, but still housing. Initiative 5 is basically we're looking at reviewing our policy of construction barriers. So understanding how we could change the system, looking at our policy and our development approvals. Some of this work has already been done through our development approvals process. So it'd be more just a view of that in terms of affordable housing. We could use the funding to dive down into some of our infrastructure capacity issues. So taking the water master plan and looking at some of the reports that we're going to need following that about, let's look at our different water sources, let's do the studies and spending our funds in that way, and identifying future projects. Because for Tofino, and I think the CMHC recognizes this, is that there is an infrastructure capacity issue for many communities. And so understanding that is going to be a big part of moving this forward. You can't build another 68 additional units on top of what we have if we can't supply the water to fund you. So this is something that will probably happen quite early in the process to sort of make sure we understand what's happening. And again, it's supported through housing needs assessment. So I'm just gonna, maybe what I'll do is I'll just finish the slide. This is only like 3 more slides, and then probably I'm assuming council, let's go back and we can discuss each initiative and start taking notes. So here's how the funding works. This is a screen grab from the Excel sheet that we're going to submit to the funder. So you can see the top there under base funding with 68 units. The base funding is 20,000. That would be $1.3 million. In terms of the top-up funding, we would be looking at creating missing middle housing. We get a top up of 12 grand per unit for all 68 units. And then finally at the bottom, there's the affordable housing bonus. And I haven't spent a ton of time with details, but of the 6849 would be affordable depending on which of those market developments we're funding, at 19,000 per unit for a total of 934. So a total $3.1 million, or funding per unit of about $45,000. So just looking at it a different way, I just broke down each of the initiatives in number of units, the percentage of the total units, the potential value based on those percentages. It's just one way of looking at it, not necessarily how we're going to fund it. The opportunities from what I understand are quite broad, and we can move our funding around as long as we're providing housing. We've had a couple of conversations about that where it seems it's a little bit vague in my opinion from CMHC, but from what I understand, it's going to be a fair amount of movement within our action plan. And the reason I put 75% funding there was what we've been told is that everybody's getting 75% if you apply and you do your reporting. And so if you planned off your 75%, that's how I would budget this. I plan off the 75% number. And then you get your last 25% based on how well you did on building units. So I don't know exactly how they're going to calculate that. Let's say we created 34 half units. They're like, cool, we'll give you 50% of your last 25%. as funding is how I understand it to work. So basically I'm saying is we should base all of our stuff off 75% in the event that we don't build any housing. This is, I don't know if Alex that seemed accurate to you.
Generally speaking, I mean, we will be required to enter into a contribution agreement, which will set out further details on requirements for achieving a certain number of units. But you know, generally speaking, there is a emphasis put on achieving the projected number of units and completing the specific initiatives that we've outlined. But I think, yeah, as you said, Aaron, it's sort of a little bit left out in the air on what requirements will be, well, that would need to sort of show that we've completed in order to see the entire amount.
Yeah, it was, there was two different meetings. The first meeting, it was quite clear for me from the representative from Steamer Street that we would get from, no matter, whoever was successful, we get 75% no matter what. And the last 25% would be based on needs. I don't think they walked it back last time, but it was a little bit less certain last time we met with them. So that's why I'm planning for 75% funding, because I think that's what the prudent thing to do would be. In terms of policy support, obviously the official community plan supports all those initiatives we just ran through, the multimodal transportation, the housing needs assessment, and the age-friendly community plan. So lots of policy support within our own documents for this project. And I think that brings me to the end. And so basically working for council support to provide to submit this application. Because we have time now, September 29th, we do have one more meeting for UBCM on September 12th. And we have an opportunity to hear feedback from council at this time, take that back, revise our application and then submit as long as I can get, you know, again, we don't need the approval from council. We want council's approval, but we, you know, if we got to the end of the rate, we don't actually need it into the end, but I'd rather, this is an opportunity for us to sort of stop, pause, hear from council and adjust as necessary. That's it.
Anyone have any questions?
Surprise. More comment, maybe more than questions. One of the, and I'm very supportive, of course, but a couple of things come to mind, and on the last part of the slide, around review policy and infrastructure barriers. You know, most of that is concerned with our big ticket in pieces of infrastructure such as water. My concern is around more of that civil infrastructure that we never account for when we look at those growth projections. We just look at those through that lens of that physical infrastructure. I'm concerned about you know, those civil pieces such as healthcare, such as community policing, such as education. And I don't know if there's room within that last initiative in terms of the infrastructure barriers to be included, to have that conversation embedded in there. I think would be very important as a bit of feedback. I think it's critical, to be honest, in terms of looking at an additional 68 units above that. And if we even project 2 people per unit, what that means in terms of the sheer need for those services. And then the other comment, and you briefly touched on, you know, potentially Mount Colnet and the supportive senior housing, of which I think is an area once again that we've neglected in general, and is an area that we know is going to be important. I've talked to several community members, as you know, who are selling and moving for those exact reasons. So anyways, those are the 2 comments to maybe digest in that application process. But thank you for the presentation. It's wonderful. I think it's a great opportunity. Just want to make sure that you know, it's targeting towards where we know the housing is most needed. I just want to make sure that with our growth, that everything is included, not just water and sewer.
I think it's a great point. I think we're at this point with the dog, and it's this analogy we're talking council for, but with the dog chasing the car, and then what happens when we catch the car. Yes.
Councilman Master?
Yeah, well, I think it's a no-brainer to support this. I'll say that straight away. Can you just, when you say incentive creation, I presume that means creation and not completion in 3 years?
I think so. What I understand is that they want to build fast, and so they would be looking at completions in three.
Because that's going to be really tough to build in 3 years, isn't it?
Yeah,
this town. I mean, I look at how long it's taken to do what we have done. So I think I said in the initial presentation, I'm concerned about meeting milestones, but it's a nice problem to have if you've got the money. Similar to Council Steer, I just wondered why, with the infrastructure capital, whether we could increase that a little bit more from 23%, or if it was set in stone. Because I see that as benefiting the whole community, and I think this community has been generally supportive of affordable housing on the whole. And I think it would be nice to see the whole community benefit a little bit from some of the infrastructure challenges we're going to have in the future, particularly water. So I just wanted a bit of flexibility there.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, and I appreciate that's just exactly what I was looking for today. So when we went with the consultant to try to figure out where we wanted to put our effort, we wanted to focus mostly on the Tofino Housing Corporation. But one of my questions was how much extra, what percentage of funding do we want to put into that infrastructure piece, like really understanding our water. Well, we're going to understand our water system, but understanding the next level of the water system and what projects we're going to have to undertake. So I think that's something that's easily, we can modify that quite easily if that's what council would like.
Yeah, I think that would be good PR for the community.
Okay.
And the last thing is, when I've looked at this with some other communities are using, saying they're going to use this to purchase land.
This is where this project gets a little bit like, I don't want to tell council things that aren't certain, but in my initial meetings with CMHC, it seemed pretty open. Like you had your action plan, but if something else came along that wasn't related to the action plan, as long as it built housing, they were supportive of it. And that feels a little bit out there for me, and I'd rather focus on what we can do. But for my initial understanding, that was kind of how I understood it as well. So I'm not sure if that's been refined as we go. Like I said, this project has dropped quickly, and I don't know if there's been a.
Yeah, I think we should be open to that if the opportunity arises, because that's the one thing we're short of.
Yes.
For affordable housing is land, or buildable land. So if we can keep that in our back pocket or whatever. But as I said, I think this is a no-brainer to apply for this, and I think we should all support it.
Thanks. The CMHC is pretty clear in their grant requirements that funding can be used for the acquisition of land for affordable housing specifically.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Thomas.
Chair. Just to Councillor McMaster's point, the remaining 25% funding, we are evaluated on building permits issued. So it's not on completed units. So we have that final 25%.
Through the chair. I just, from talking to other resort municipality mayors and other mayors in BC across the country, we have a lot going for us. We do have a little bit of land. We've got housing corporation, very few other places too. We have a housing assessment report. So we've actually been quite proactive. And we've got a lot of developers sitting there waiting, and their pro formas just aren't quite working. And so I just want to put it out there in the public that if we do go for this, that we have a very good chance of getting something built in the timeline. So just, I think we could be successful, quite successful.
That's great news. We're being a bit conservative in our application compared to some other communities. Partly it's because our growth rate is so high. We can't make these grand, there's just so much room to move.
Anderson?
Yeah, just my comment is that I like that it will set us up with kind of a base of more policy and more tools to provide affordable housing beyond the I mean, hopefully we'll get bigger than it, but it will set us up well beyond the time period as well. With some more tools in the box and some more planning and policy. So that's great.
Through the chair, I do have a question. I'm just curious, I know the ACRD is what's, will be applying for this as well. And I'm wondering if there has been any conversations as we have embarked on a regional housing assessment and having those conversations at a larger regional level. I'm just curious, has there been any touching with any of our other, our municipality down the road and with the ACRD?
Not that I'm aware, but I was away for a little bit. So,
If I may, not related to the grant application or our application, but I am connected with the regional CAOs just to touch base on what their applications are looking like and staying informed in that regard. There was some discussion on whether a regional approach would be appropriate into the future, perhaps a corporation. I think we are the amount of work that we are putting into our corporation presently. I think we would be challenged to be able to do something regionally at this time. And so I've shared that with the CAOs, and we are staying connected in that regard.
Any further questions or comments?
One more?
Sure.
I think we're a really good bet. For the record.
You're not biased, are you?
Well, I think I should I move this?
Somebody,
Okay.
sure.
Okay, I'm
Could
gonna,
be doing.
I move that the District of Tofino Council support the Housing Accelerator Fund Grant application attached as Appendix 1 to the Housing Accelerator Fund Grant application report dated August 28th, 2023.
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Steer. All in favor? None opposed. Motion's carried. And is there any questions or?
Thank you. For question period.
Yeah,
Thank you, Councillor Sloman. I'll now do a call for questions. If there are anyone attending online via Zoom and would like to make a comment or question rather, you can do so now using the Q&A function on Zoom. You'll need to state your name, your address, and the agenda item you are speaking to. I'll now do a call, calling once, calling twice, calling 3 times. There are no current questions at this time. Thank you, Councillor Sloman.
okay. And then I move through unanimous consent that this meeting is adjourned at 6:16. No objections. We're adjourned.